So physical gold and silver in your possession, like the Bank for International Settlements tells us, it runs zero counterparty risk. And remember, a key part of the Zang Enterprise Sound Money strategy is physical gold to make sure that if your fiat money wealth goes away, you are properly diversified with gold to protect that wealth. Because in just months, the cracks have become chasms. The Sachs restructured its bonds after a single payment, one single payment. New Fortress Energy's debt collapsed days later, and Tricolor Holdings near total wipeout. And then First Brands, Opaque, over-leveraged, and boop, gone. Each meltdown hits investors with losses way over 60% and some up to 100%. But frankly, the music has changed. And the institutions that once funded this private credit boom, well, guess what? They're pulling back. They're raising rates, tighter regulations, and shifting risk appetites. That have all dried up. And the old liquidity wells, the masquerade needs new dancers. And guess who's being invited in? You, me, everyday Americans. Not through the front door, mind you. Oh, no. But through their retirement accounts, their 401ks and target date funds, and diversified alternatives are quietly being restructured in this risk transfer mechanism to absorb this risk. The illusion is that it's still safe, still passive, and oh my goodness, you're going to make so much money, still long term. But the reality is that private credit, once reserved for the most sophisticated players, is now being repackaged for mass consumption. And then came First Brands. The auto parts supplier imploded spectacularly last month, leaving investors and creditors scrambling. How it operated, where it got its money, even who was running it, largely a mystery. So few outside the company had a full view of the red flags. It's a stark example of what happens when money floods into opaque financing structures with very little oversight and even less transparency. This isn't democratization. That's what they want you to think. It's desperation dressed as opportunity for the many. And it is absolutely risk transfer from the few to the many. So that when the music stops, guess who's holding the ball? And if we don't pull back the curtain, people will unknowingly become the exit liquidity for a system that's already showing cracks, huge cracks. So let's talk about how we got here and what you can do to protect yourself before that next act begins. There has been so much demand for these assets that people have lost sight of due diligence before they invest. But how can you even do diligence? Because it's opaque. You can't see it. And perhaps even more important than ever, when the company is privately held, you cannot do this due diligence. The risk demand is strong in this buy everything trade because we've been trained short-term thinking, short, buy the dips, buy everything because everything's going to keep going up. And it very well may because they keep printing this crap. But the collapse of First Brands, that's raised a lot of questions about the risks of private financing and the lack of transparency in the financial industry. With investors and creditors grappling with the consequences of the company's opaque financial transactions, and they want you to think this is one-off, frankly, this is a great example of counterparty risk. Ta-dam! So physical gold and silver in your possession, like the Bank for International Settlements tells us, it runs zero counterparty risk. And remember, a key part of the Zang Enterprise Sound Money strategy is physical gold to make sure that if your fiat money wealth goes away, you are properly diversified with gold to protect that wealth. Because in just months, The cracks have become chasms. The Saks restructured its bonds after a single payment, one single payment. New Fortress Energy's debt collapsed days later, and Tricolor Holdings near total wipeout. And then First Brands, Opaque, over-leveraged, and boop, gone. Each meltdown hits investors with losses way over 60% and some up to 100%. This is the dark side of private credit. No transparency, no accountability, no good investor protections, and now no institutional funding. So they're coming for retail. That's where the money is, through 401ks, target date funds, and diversified alternatives. But we don't need their masquerade. We need a layered sound money strategy and real assets, real sovereignty, real security. And you need that security in food, water, energy, security itself, barterability, wealth preservation, community, as well as shelter. That is what will protect you. And it's not opaque. It's real. And it's important to do your due diligence because that used to mean something. But today's credit markets, they're a fog machine. Investors are flying blind, chasing yield in a bubble so grotesquely overcapitalized that it's cracking under its own weight. Everyone should be forewarned on this one. Well, let me tell you guys, you're being forewarned, but I've been talking about it for a long time now, how that reach for yield puts you in jeopardy. And these recent blow-ups, well, I got to be honest, it could be the canary in the coal mine. Because private credit didn't just compete with banks, it borrowed from them in that incestuous loop that we've talked about many times in the past. These firms, well, they took business from leveraged loan desks at the bank, but then they turned around and became some of the bank's biggest clients, and we can't even see that. It is a tangled web, and now the landmines are going off in both corners. A one-off? I'm not so sure that that's true, because those underwriting standards, all over the map. JP Morgan just ate a $170 million loss on Tricolor. And as the froth clears, expect credit losses to spike. This isn't just a shift. It's a systemic warning. So what do we do when the masquerade turns toward us? When the system starts dressing risk as retirement drag and calling it innovation and democratization, we step off the dance floor. We stop playing by their rules and start building our own foundation.